Hello everyone, and welcome to the new episode of the Stephen King podcast. This time it's episode number 52. This one will be a supersized edition. Talk about the first half of the Bazaar of Bad Dreams stories, the 10 first stories. Then we'll talk about the first half of this season of Haven, and then we will talk about the big thing on the internet that's exploded so far, just the last couple of days, and that is some Dark Tower casting news, right?
Potential,
yes, right.
Yep.
And with me, I have Lou, as usual. Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Yes.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Excited over today's episode.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Should we start with the news?
Welcome. Do not fear the door that lies before you. We will protect you. We are your guides, Hans and Lou, and we will give you the latest in Stephen King news. But before we do so, you must prove yourself worthy. You must open the door and join us in the death room.
We shall. And the first item up is new editions of old Stephen King books from Simon & Schuster. So we reported on this previously in another podcast. I think those are like 20-odd books from Stephen King from his previous publisher that Simon & Schuster have now acquired the rights to, that back catalog. And starting in January 2016, they're going to be releasing new versions of Stephen King's books on paperback and ebook. And there's a collage of book covers up on Hans' site. You can see the posts from November 30th, and you can see them for The Long Walk, The Dead Zone, Firestarter, Roadwork, so forth. I don't know if these are all of them, but it covers quite a span of books, and they're very, to me, it screams that Simon & Schuster is really working to establish the Stephen King brand, because his name is featured prominently pretty well at the top of most of these books, and the artwork for the books is very minimalistic, quite different than the more traditional covers that we were used to, or the more eye-catching covers, like I'm thinking of the Salem's Lot with the black cover with a drop of blood, and The Shining, the silver cover with the silhouette of Danny's hair and his face. These are much more minimalistic. Yeah. I don't want to say amateurish, but they're just more simplistic, and I personally don't really like them. But I can understand why they're trying to distance or establish that these are a different version of the books that Simon & Schuster's putting out, and they're just really making sure that the Stephen King brand name is out there, which I don't really think he needs at this point in his career. But I can understand from a marketing perspective why they're doing it, but they'll never replace the originals in my heart.
No, I agree. And one thing that's a little bit strange is that they have changed the font size and look on King's name from what we used to, and I would think that they would go more with their the way they usually release his books to show that it's their editions. Now they could have been published by virtually any publisher. This definitely doesn't say Simon & Schuster or paperback books. That's,
I guess, well, we can't see the spine,
yeah,
right? So.
Yeah. But if you just see the front of them, I would assume that they would have gone more with making them look like the recent book they have published, at least in using the Stephen King name, the same look of that one. And when I look at them now, I realize that not even on these the font size is the same. They have actually done it in, is it called italic, when it leans a little, when the letters leans a little bit?
Yeah, well, to me, it looks like somebody did them with a paintbrush.
Yeah. And they different. On some books, they are very straight, and on others, they are leaning a little bit. So they haven't even used the same font on all of these. So I'm not very impressed by them either. I think they could have been done nicer. What's good to me though is that they look similar, and you can see that they are from the same author.
Mm-hmm.
But as you say, they will not be favorites.
No, and I'm assuming they're just doing this with the back catalog ones, because we've seen the cover for the Mr. Mercedes books.
Yeah, and the Watch.
I think End of Watch,
Yeah.
and it's not done in this style at all. But maybe when it goes, out of its initial printing run and it starts becoming a back catalog item, they might switch it over to this style. I think they're just, trying to differentiate between his older stuff and his new stuff.
Yeah. One thing that's good though is that in English you can get all the older books, as opposites here in Sweden, where you can't actually buy the older books in stores. You have to go to the secondary market. So any new fans have to look that way to get the Swedish versions, and some of them are really hard to get. So it's a good thing that they are making them available though.
That's good. Okay.
Yeah.
So, like, you have like a Swedish version of Amazon or something like that, don't you?
Yeah, we have.
Do they have the older cover?
For these books?
Yeah.
I haven't actually looked, but I would imagine that if they have some in stock, they would still have the older covers.
Yeah.
And
Even those have changed covers since their initial release as well.
Yeah.
But they're not as minimalistic as these are. And of course, that's by a different publisher too. So.
Yeah, I think they have the covers of the actual book they have in store. So, and they are very inconsistent. They order from the UK or the US, and some have both, and some have just one, and so on. So it's if you want a special edition, you have to be very exact and look careful that you get what you want. So otherwise, they just send you one.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, moving on is, and the next item is a movie news. And that is that the movie Cell now has a release date in the UK. I think it was in the last podcast we mentioned that the US distributor didn't have the rights anymore, and we didn't know what was going to happen with this one. But now a distributor called Signature Entertainment in the UK has acquired the rights to distribute Cell in the UK. And the reason this has been known is that the British Board of Film Classification, which is basically the institute that decides what ratings the movie should have, if they're going to cut it, and how it's going to be labeled so everyone knows what they're getting. They have it listed, and they list it as a release on February 26th next year, and it will be 97 minutes and 40 seconds long. So it's a pretty long movie for this one, but maybe that's a good thing. What do you think?
Well, I'm surprised it's under 2 hours, to be honest, which to me means they've cut out a lot. And I imagine it's probably the middle section of the book that they've probably compressed quite a bit. It'll be curious to see how much of the first part of the movie is going to be focused on the initial breakdown of society, which is probably one of the stronger sections in the book, the whole trying to get out of the city stuff that King wrote. And then the whole back half of the movie, or the back third of the movie, I assume will be trying to defeat the hive mind that's risen up because of the cell phone thing. So it's interesting that it hasn't got a U.S. or North American release date yet.
Yeah.
So maybe it has, and maybe it just hasn't been reported yet. But February, is traditionally the dumping ground for movies that the studios don't have any faith in. And the fact that this is being targeted for that month doesn't give me a lot of hope that we're going to get something worthy of a worthy adaptation of the material, which is too bad because, you've got John Cusack and Sam Jackson, who both actors who I like quite a bit.
Yeah.
Though John Cusack's kind of getting into that territory with who's the actor from Wings? Weber,
Yeah.
I think it is, who did a lot of King stuff in the 90s.
Yeah.
So I kind of think Cusack should really step away from doing any further King projects after this. And this movie might make him come to the same conclusion.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it will be at least viewable. Because
Yes.
the story is quite good, I think. And if you head over to my site, I have listed some of the information that the British Board of Film Classification has listed, and there are spoilers about what happens in the movie, but they give you an example of violence, how detailed injuries are, what language is used, and stuff like that, so you get an idea of what you can expect to see in the movie. But there are some spoilers, so if you don't want to know anything, you should stay clear of this. But if you don't mind, you can check that out and see. It will give you an idea of how they judge movies like this.
Mm-hmm. All right. So the next item up is, and people might not know this, but we have had to re-record the news section on that, which has actually worked out in our favor because we're going to be able to talk about this Dark Tower item that we had missed or had come after our initial recording. So, Hans, I see here you've got a item up on December 8th that it is now possible to listen to Stephen King's radio station, WKIT 100.3,
Yes.
on your phone.
Yes.
So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Have you listened to it?
No, I have not. Have you?
Yeah, it's actually a good station. Earlier you could listen to it from their website, and I actually listened to it at least a couple of days each week when I was at work and wanted something to listen to.
Okay.
And they play quite good music if you have the same taste as I have, it's a radio station, and now you can listen to it in your iPhone or Android phone. So just remember that if you aren't on Wi-Fi, it will cost you some data traffic. So be aware of that.
Right. How much of a presence or Stephen King presence does the station have? Like, do you even know that he owns it, or do they reference him at all?
I think they have done that sometimes, but mostly not. They don't mention that it's a station that Stephen King owns and something like that. But they have mentioned him sometimes in other stuff. So I think they might be more keen to actually mention him when there's news to mention than maybe other radio stations. Yeah. But it's not.
And it's mostly rock and roll,
yeah,
right?
It's rock and roll. And it's not promoted as Stephen King's station, so you won't.
It'd be kind of cool if he had like a block of horror, related shows, even like a talk show or a podcast or some live streaming thing like that too. But I guess the money's not there for that. But that would be kind of cool.
I guess we can offer to air our podcast there if they. Right?
What a great idea.
Might even do it for free.
Yeah, that would be kind of awesome.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay, so one more news item that you want to talk about, I guess?
Yes, 11/22/63, and there are tons of news from this one. You have new photos. You have, I don't know if we mentioned the trailer. I think we did. But you have photos, and you have photos of each character describing a little bit about them. And this one is really taking off, and we don't have much time until it's released. February 15.
President's Day in the U.S.
Yes, it will start airing on Hulu, and they are definitely starting to build up for it, promoting it. I wouldn't be surprised if we got another trailer soon. It's only, when we record this, it's 64 days left. So I think we're going to see more about this one as well as time nears mid-February. But head over to my site and you will see a lot of pictures and stuff about it. And I have really high hopes, as I've said before, about this one. I think it will be a great adaptation.
Yep. Looking forward to
Yep.
it. Everything I've seen of it, it looks very cinematic. So, and that's pretty impressive for a TV show. And the cast all looks good. And I'm really excited to see Chris Cooper. Unfortunately, his part won't be really that big, but he's the right guy to ground the whole time travel part of the story. Much like older actors, just for whatever reasons, make that kind of stuff more believable. Like in Lord of the Rings, I think Ian McKellen really grounds that movie that makes you believe a lot of the fantastical stuff that takes place. And I think Chris Cooper is going to fulfill the same role in this movie or his television series.
Yeah.
And of course, we will be reviewing it as it airs.
Definitely. Yep.
The last bit of news, I guess, is the whole Dark Tower casting news that we got, which came after our original try at the news, and a very divisive within the fandom ranks, particularly a bit of casting, possible casting has been put forth. Do you want to tell us what that casting news is?
Should we do that, or should we keep everyone waiting until we talk more about it later on?
I think we could just mention it.
Okay, we can mention it.
Yeah.
It was actually this last Friday. It was released, and the first thing I want to say is that this is released as a rumor. No one has confirmed it, and as far as I know, the rumor came from Deadline, and they really didn't specify where they got it from. So we don't know if it's correct, and we don't know who released this information. So that is why we are going to treat this as a rumor for now.
Right. It's just like the rumor of McConaughey to play Roland, or not Roland, but Randall Flagg.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
but the casting news is that Idris Elba, is that how he's spelled?
Idris
Elba, the actor, has been, or is the front runner to play Roland in the Dark Tower. And the big issue with this one is, of course, that Mr. Elba is a black man, and Roland is, at least in the illustrations of the book, a white man. And this has gotten the entire internet to explode formally. I don't think I ever seen this much reaction to any King news in years,
right?
Or in this rumor as it actually is.
And the awesome thing for the podcast is me and Hans are on opposite sides of whether or not we think this is a good idea. So we're going to have a much longer discussion about this later on in the podcast. So consider it a Christmas gift that we have something to discuss where we don't agree.
Yeah.
So that will be a lot of fun.
Will be.
Okay. And that is the news.
This is great. What's our job? We'd like drive around and pick up stiffs or what?
It's time for reviews from the night shift.
And now, Hans and I are going to review the first 10 stories in the Stephen King collection, The Bazaar of Bad Dreams.
Okay, the first story is Mile 81. And this one was actually published as an ebook originally. And it's been out there for quite some time. So, and we can mention this about the book. There are a few new stories that hasn't been published at all, but most of them have been published in some in hard to find publications, and some in easier to find. And I would say that Mile 81 might be one of the easier, since it was released as a standalone ebook actually. So I think a lot of people might have read this already.
Right.
Did you read it before?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. Anyhow, it's about a rest area called Mile 81, where we encounter a very special car that has, well, it probably isn't a car at all, right? It's more like a living being from some other dimension. That is, well, it's basically eating people who stops and because they assume that something has happened because they see a car parked at a rest stop that isn't being used anymore. So,
Right.
and we have a couple of people going to it, and they are swallowed up by it. And we have this kid, whose name I can't remember now. Is it Peter? Peter, yeah.
Pete Simmons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who is actually he's a little bit mad because he can't be with his big brother and his friends. So he's going to this rest area to, basically break into it and see what's in there. And he actually he finds a bottle of alcohol and drinks a bit of it and pass out or fall asleep. And wakes up when this is already happening, when some people have been eaten by this car, and stuff are actually happening. I also read this one when it was released, and I remember feeling that the main characters, I don't know if maybe that's the wrong name for it, but the two kids, I think that they are acting way too mature for their ages. I don't know if you felt the same as well, or did you think they were?
I think all the kids are acting a little above their age in this story, but you just kind of go with it. It wasn't really a big problem for me.
No. Well, I didn't have as much problem with it reading it now when it was released now, but I remember when I read it the first time, it really bothered me. They are 6 and 4 years old, Rachel and Blake, and they acted. At least I think maybe because my kids were younger at that time, so I think I had I was closer to when they were in that age, and it didn't really work for me. So, and now they're bigger, and I'm getting more forgetful. So I think that that might play a part in it. But yeah. What were your thoughts otherwise about this one?
Yeah, I think I had the same thing that you mentioned when I first read it. I thought that the kids, especially the Rachel, the girl, the 6-year-old, I thought she acted beyond her years, and I even know King sort of addresses that in the story, and it's kind of a necessity for the story to flow the way it does, that she's able to be, sort of be a bit adultish with certain actions. But what I really like about the story is that the premise is, everybody's seen like the abandoned gas station or restaurant along a road or a highway or something like that. So that part of the story works really well. That's something that we're all familiar with. It's kind of like the rabid dog, or being afraid of the dark, or the monster under the bed. So the story starts with something that we're all familiar with, which I really like. And then he adds the fantastical element of this person eating car, which is, is kind of ridiculous. Or it feels pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
I don't think this is something that you could film and sell it and make it work properly. No. In a story, your imagination kind of makes it work for you. So I hope that they never try to make a film version of this, because I just don't think it'll work. But what really strikes me again is King's ability to create characters, and he does it with the boy Peter, he does it with the little kids, and he also does it with all the victims. Like, each one gets a chapter. You've got the traveling salesman, you've got the woman with the horse. Each one of them feels like a real person, even though they're not in the story very long.
Yeah. So
that when they meet their demise, you really identify with what's going on with these characters, much like he did in the beginning of Mr. Mercedes, with all the people in the line waiting for a job. Even though they were only in one chapter, you got to know them as people.
Yeah.
And he has the same thing going on here again. So I really enjoyed it from that perspective. It's an amazing textbook case of a writer showing you his greatest strengths, and that is creating characters.
Yeah, it's very rare that we meet a character in King's book that just appears and kind of dies or something like that. He always tells us about it. And you're right. This one really shows his strength in doing so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this one is fairly long. It's almost it's like 46 pages in the book.
Right.
What are your thoughts about this? Is this a short story that should be in here, or should it be? Because we have a couple of stories here that's already been published as books, even though they are not books in the real sentence, maybe, but they are. They, like this one was released as an ebook and promoted like a book, even though it's fairly short. And do you think King should include books like this, or?
Well, I think so, because it's for the dedicated King fans, they're going to go hunt around and dig up these things. But there's a lot of people that are more casual readers who will only pick up his book, his physical books, or or a book that's got a substantial number of pages to it, that like a regular novel that he would write. So I bet you for a large percentage of the people that are picking up this book, all these stories are probably going to be new to them, because they don't go hunting around in magazines or ebooks to pick up these things. And maybe it's a mix for me of reading stories for the second time in a lot of cases, or because they're in a book, but I found that I enjoyed them a lot more when they were in this collection. And Mile 81 is definitely one of those stories that I enjoyed much more this time than when I read it the first time.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you.
And it's just a convenience of having all these short stories in one easy to find volume.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good thing to have them all collected.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, do you have any other insights about this one?
Well, I guess you could say there's some from a Buick 8 connection, perhaps, which has sort of like a Dark Tower connection as well. So there's that aspect of the story as well.
Yeah. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Well, because of with the Dark Tower mythology, we have all these alternate worlds, and we know from a Buick 8 that this is a similar kind of scenario, but that car was driven by one of the men in the low coats. So we have that connection as well with this story. Yeah.
So it's once again shows how King is able to connect all the stories. Not all the stories, but many stories to the Dark Tower universe.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you think it's a good story?
From a character perspective, I think it works pretty well. I mean, there is something to be said about a car that eats people. That's your B horror trope, I guess you could say, mixed in with characters that you really care about. So this would be kind of, if somebody made this into a movie, I have a feeling it would end up to be something like one of the Children of the Corn type of movies. But it's just a fun romp. It's not something that I would take seriously. Like, there's much more serious pieces in here. So I would just say this is like a fun B movie kind of piece of fiction. Yeah, I agree. It's a likable story, but it's not my favorite in the collection. Mm-hmm. Okay, do you want to move on to the next one? Sure. You want me to set that one up? Okay, the next one's called Premium Harmony, and this, to me, was a new story. Was it a new one to you? No, I had read it before. Okay, I don't remember reading this one before. So this is about a married couple who've been married for 10 years, and I guess you could say the romance has gone out of their relationship. And they're constantly arguing about things, and money's tight, and she's not, the wife is not as good looking as she used to be, and the husband's got smoking and things of that nature. So they're stopping outside of a variety store to pick up a birthday present for one of her nephews, and they don't leave on good terms. And when he gets called into the store, and his wife has passed away from a heart attack. And it's a character piece. Neither one of these characters are very likable, but unfortunately, I think there's a lot of people that live like this. So it's, King in his foreword to the story was talking about a certain writer, Raymond Carver, who liked his style of able to capture small life moments, but with a kind of a black humor. And I do have to say that this story did make me laugh a couple of times. even though the guy is kind of a sleazebag, even, he's already trying to line up his next conquest, even while his wife's body hasn't really even warm or turned cold on the floor. So it's an interesting character piece, dark, and it was a good read.
Yeah. Actually, this kind of stories is one of my favorite type of stories, where you it's it's like you pop in on people and you caught them in just a glimpse of their lives, and you follow them like I don't know how long this one is, but maybe an hour or something like that, and you just pop in and something happens and you pop out, and I think this is a great story, and I like the as you say, it's a realistic story. A lot of people probably live like this, so I think this is a really great story. It's short, fast read, and I like it a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. Moving along. The next one is called Batman and Robin Have an Altercation, and we could mention also that Premium Harmony was actually published in the November issue of the New Yorker in 2009. For those who want to look up the original publication. The next one is called Batman and Robin Have an Altercation. This one was published in Harper's Magazine in 2012. And the next story is called Batman and Robin Have an Altercation. And this one was originally published in Harper's Magazine back in 2012. And it's a kind of funny title because it really has nothing to do with Batman and Robin, except that the main characters went as them on a Halloween. And the story is about a father who is suffering from Alzheimer's, and his son who is every week he takes him to lunch at a restaurant, and it basically plays out the same each week, that the father doesn't remember that they have been there before. He doesn't remember what's on the menu, but still he always orders the same thing every time. And on their way back home from this restaurant, they are in an accident with a really scary man who actually beats up the son, and the father comes to his rescue with I don't remember exactly what he uses, but he clubs down the other man.
Oh, he stabs him in the neck.
Ah, yeah, that's right. Sorry.
I thought you'd remember that.
I like that kind of thing.
That's right up your alley, right?
Yep. Sorry about that. And this is also the kind of story where you just pop in a character's life and you follow them for a short while. Something happen and then you leave. So we don't really know what happened after this stabbing and when the police come, and we don't know how it all ends out. Even though I would really know what happens and how things turn out for these two. But I like again stories where we just pop in on people and are with them for a while and then we leave. So this one is also one that I really like.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite in the collection as well. It works so well from a character's perspective. Plus, this is one of those stories that, unfortunately, a lot of readers probably can relate to or know somebody who's had a relative or parent who's, suffered from this kind of degeneration as they get older. And King just plays that part of it really well. He really gets you in the mindset of this son who's doing his duty for his dad. And I think the title works perfectly because basically that moment with the accident when his father saves him is, goes back to when he looked up to his dad as a hero when he was a kid. Yeah. And it's basically playing that out again. And it's just, taking a scenario that we're all familiar with and just adding that special Stephen King twist that takes it into that next, that left turn into darkness. And the bittersweet thing about it is, that his father's basically turns back to, his current condition with his Alzheimer's and doesn't even know what he's done. So it's it's just a really poignant story, and I really, this is one of my favorite stories in the collection. We've read this before.
Yeah.
It came out in the collection, and it's even more powerful knowing what's coming. I really like the story a lot.
Yeah, I agree. And as you say, and it's strange in that way that it didn't really give away anything about the story. Right? It gives you an idea of what the story would be like, and you get something totally different. So I think it's a good story and a good title.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should we move on?
Yep. The Dune.
Yes.
And this is one that I knew it was out, but I never got around to reading it. And in Stephen King's preface, he says sometimes stories are an act of discovery as he's writing them. But he said this one came to him fully formed. And he basically says sometimes the mover finger writes and moves on. And he just said that's basically how this story came to him one day while he was walking on the beach of Florida with his dog. I don't know if that was Molly, that he's always putting Twitter pictures up about, but he said this story came fully formed for him, and it's a nifty little thriller and about a judge who we're led to believe, or he is during the course of the story, that he's fairly old and he's on those last legs, but he's connected to this dune, which is just basically like a little sandbank out in the river. And every time he goes out there, it starts putting the name of somebody or something where they're going to die. So he's sort of got this strange relationship, attraction, repulsion with this place. He can't really stay away from it. And it's kind of like a junkie. Once he's sort of had a taste of it and that power of knowing the future, sort of in a grim way, he keeps going back there. And he's basically making up his last will and testament because he thinks, we're led to believe that he's dying because he's got this pain in his stomach, which we think is cancer or something like that. So he's telling his lawyer all this. And then it has that nice little twist at the end that, because we've been sort of led to believe that the name in the sand that he saw the last time was his name. But as we find out over the course of the story, it's not his name that's in the sand.
No. Yeah, and I think that is the real payoff with this story, that it actually isn't his name, and I don't know about you, did you see it coming?
No, and I think that's and I should have in retrospect, but that was the cleverness of it. But King really sets the story up that we really think that the judge is on his last legs. So, because he's old and he has trouble, King goes into great description describing how hard it is for him now to get out of the boat onto the sandbank and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, and he's making up his last will and testament. So it's kind of like, like he really camouflages it well. So the ending is quite a twist, and it's, like the last line of the book. Oh no, he says, not mine.
Yeah, yeah.
When the lawyer asks him, why are you in such a hurry to get this will done?
Yeah.
So, it's got a nice twist ending.
Yeah, I love that ending. And I think it's really set up very well, as you say, that he tells you over and over how fragile and how close to death he is, this judge. And I didn't see it coming either. And like you, that when it came, I realized that I should have seen this coming.
Mm-hmm. But, and the good thing about this story is that it doesn't feel cheap, because like a lot of short horror stories, when you get this kind of thing where there's a twist at the end, this one is would be a satisfying story without that twist. But it was just a nice little cherry on the top for the story. But if the story had gone the way we would have thought it still would have worked as a good story too. So, to me, that's a sign of a really good story, really good writing.
Definitely. And this one was actually published back in 2011 in a publication called Granta, issue 117, if you want to look that up.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to the next one, and this one has been talked about quite a lot. It's called Bad Little Kid, and this one was actually out in French and German before it it was released here. And the reason for that is that King went to Paris and Hamburg and one other place in Germany that I can't remember right now, back in 2013, and he wanted to do this as a thank you to the fans that he thought that had really appreciated his visiting and had been really kind to them. And it was published in the beginning of 2014, and the German name for it was Böse kleine Junge. I don't know if that translation was right. And the French name was Seilgoose. I don't know if that's the right pronunciation either. Probably not.
Seilgosse.
Yeah. Thank you. A lot of fans were mad at King for not publishing it in English. But here it is. It's out now. It's the story about a man who at different times in his life see this little kid who... the first time is when he's in school, and this kid steals his friend's lunchbox, and by doing so, he tricks her to run out in the road and being run over by a car. And later in life, he interferes with his girlfriend, and he pops up from time to time, and each time he do, someone dies. And the kid doesn't age. He's the same. I think he's 6 years old. I think he says. Something
like that,
yeah. And he has this hat with a little propeller on top of it.
A beanie.
And he is pure evil, if you can say that about a 6-year-old kid. But I guess you can when it's King who writes the stories. And this is told by the story, by the man who is seeing this kid, and he's called George Halas, and he tells this on death row to his lawyer, and the reason he is on death row is because the final time that he sees this kid, he chases him down and basically kills him, and I think he shoots him in both arms and both legs, and it's not a pretty kill, but he has so much anger towards him for all he has done, and he's been arrested for it and charged with murder. And he tells this lawyer about this, and of course the lawyer doesn't believe him. He wants to use this to get him acquitted for being insane. But once he leaves the prison, he hears something. I think does he see him? No, I think he hears the kid. So
he thinks he sees something out of the corner of
his eye.
But...
that's right. Yeah. So there might be something to this, and not just this George being crazy. And I think this is also a very good story. And you are, as a reader, you are left a little bit up to you to decide if this man is crazy and the lawyer is just seeing stuff because he's been told this story, or if this really is some kind of supernatural devil kid that he is actually putting down. So I like this one, and I'm happy that it's released now so everyone can read it. Mm-hmm. Maybe not everyone. It's maybe everyone can't speak English, but most people is able to read it now at least.
Yep. Yeah, I never read it until this collection. Of course, it's the one that I heard the most about before it was finally released in English. And it's a good story. It's a solid horror story. It's a pretty conventional horror story. And this twist ending is the kind of twist ending that you do see coming.
Yeah.
So there's not really a surprise there at the end. And yeah, I mean, it's a good story. I can't say it's one of my favorite. I much prefer the previous two that we talked about over this one, but it was a fun story.
Yeah, I agree. And now people can read it as we said. Yeah,
exactly.
And moving on to the next one, and I'm going to be a little blunt here, but I'm going to take this one from you because this is probably my favorite in the entire collection. I hope you don't mind.
Oh,
This one is actually
okay.
called A Death, and this is the kind of story that I like. It's quite short. I had read this before. It was also published previous to its release here. It was released in... can't see that right now. Okay, it was released anyway before the book was released. And it takes place in the Wild West some time ago, for a long time. And this mentally disabled man is arrested for the murder of a child who he is still stealed silver dollar from. And he denies doing it. He's lost his hat. It's found near the victim, but he can't remember doing it. So he denies doing it. And the police search for this silver dollar, and they can't find it. But he's sentenced, and he's sentenced to be hanged. And they have to build I don't know what it's called, but where they're going to hang him.
Gallows.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. So he has to stay in jail for a couple of days, 3 or 4 days, I think. They don't find this silver dollar, and this sheriff is actually thinking that maybe they have gotten the wrong person here, because he's not very smart, and if he had found this silver dollar, he would probably have bought booze for it, or he would have had it left somewhere on him or hidden it in his home, but they can't find it. So he's actually starting to wonder if they have the wrong person. But he's sentenced, and the sentence is carried out, and he's hung, and afterwards, because when people die, certain parts of the body open up and release themselves. And I don't know how to say that in a nicer way. Yeah. Yep. Anyway, in his pants, they find this silver dollar after he's dead. Since he's been in the jail so long, it has to have passed through him several times during that time. And yeah, well, you can figure it out yourself how it's done. And it's such a nasty story, but I still can't help liking it. And it's also one of those endings that you didn't really expect. I personally thought that he would be innocent, and they would kill an innocent man, and it will turn out that someone had framed him or something like that. But he was actually guilty, and the way they found out, I think, was both gross and very imaginative for someone like that. So I don't know what you thought about this one, but I really liked it.
Yeah, again, this is I think King mentions in his foreword to this that he was thinking of Elmore Leonard when he wrote this, and it's got that really sparse dialogue, and it's just a really well written character study again, and the audience is sort of sees the story from the point of view of the sheriff, and this sheriff is he's not a rookie. He's been around for a long time, and he, over the course of the story, begins to have doubts about whether or not the accused person is actually guilty or not. And the accused person is so dumb. You've heard the expression of dumb evil. And I think a lot of things in life that we think of evil is a result of stupidity more than planned, like master criminal kind of things. It's dumb accidents, or it's just, a person being in the wrong place at the wrong time, like this girl getting this money from her parents for her birthday, and that this guy just, this dumb guy just happens to come across her and wants that money to buy a drink or something like that. So, and King plays on people's, I guess it's a little bit of a litmus test. It's kind of playing like how do you perceive people in general? Do you try to give them the benefit of the doubt? And because this guy is so dumb, you don't really think that he's got the ability to actually kill somebody. Yeah. So, and I think that's what the sheriff is finding begins to plant seeds of doubt in him because the character is so dumb and so adamant that he didn't do anything wrong and there's not really any, all the proof seems rather circumstantial. And like you said, the fact that this dollar isn't found kind of makes you think that somebody else did it and set this poor schlep up to take the fall for the crime. And it's just a well executed piece, and it's written in such a lean style. Like there's not a lot of exposition or description. It's a real bare bones kind of story where the writing makes you as a reader fill in a lot of the details in your mind, and I think that's part of the reason why we are led down the path believing that this person is actually innocent when he's in fact not. So again, I just think it's a different style of story than the Batman and Robin have an altercation, but it's really, really, really well done. And it's one of my favorite pieces in the book as well, in this collection as well.
Yep. And this one was actually out in the New Yorker in March this year.
Yeah, it's a great story. So I remember liking it when it first came out, and I like it even more when I read it again in this collection.
Yeah,
it's great, nasty, sobering little piece.
Yeah. Sorry, I had to
leaves you
steal it
thinking.
from you.
Yeah, I should make you take the next one, because the next one is called The Bone Church, and I love the title, and I'm not much for poetry. I find it's a very difficult type of writing for me to read. And because poetry is deliberately open to interpretation, the storytelling or the message is never really clear. And it's more to create a mood than to actually tell you a story, I think, or to make you feel a set of emotions rather than a specific one, which is quite difficult to pull off for both the reader and the writer. And this one has to do with, it's called The Bone Church, and it's about somebody called Manning who has passed away, we believe. And it's about a troop of guys that went into Vietnam, and out of 32 of them, only 3 came back alive or something like that. Maybe it's Vietnam, or maybe, there's also scientists in it, so maybe it's just some sort of expedition somewhere. So there is kind of a story here, and I think it's about finding some sort of fountain of youth or immortality or something like that, but the price is really high that nobody survives, right?
Yeah.
And basically, whatever it is, this person's experience, he's gone mad. So it's a really dark piece. It's a little difficult to parse out for me. I thought at first it was a Vietnam piece because King talked about it in his preface, writing about this, during his college days. And I think he mentions, he's really into Robert Browning at the time. And besides the Dark Tower poem, there was another one that he really liked, was My Last Duchess by Robert Browning. So this is kind of in that vein. So it is a horror story, and it also kind of gives me a Lovecraft vibe a little bit too. So, but it's a tough piece for me to rate. How about you, Hans?
Yeah, I agree with exactly what you're saying. I have never actually enjoyed poetry in any shape or form. Well, there is a story in it, as you mentioned, but it's very, very hard to get to it, I think, when it's written in that format. And I think this is one of the pieces here that I will have read now once and probably never read again. I don't know. It's totally not something that I enjoy very much. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I think it's fun that King is trying, and I'm sure there are people who enjoy this one. I mean, we are not to say what's good and what's bad. It's just I don't enjoy it, but I'm sure that other will. And he tries to, he publish scripts and audiobook exclusive and ebooks and stuff like that. So I think it's good that he's doing publishes stuff in different ways. So I don't mind him doing this, but this one is not for me.
It kind of blows my mind if you read his notes about the story. Or poem, that he says he writes hundreds of these things, and he says he's not very good at it. That's why he's only published a few. But I can imagine, I don't know, unless he's got a specific instructions, after he's gone, that somebody's going to try to collect these things and put them in a book. But he might have specific provisions against that, because if he says that he's not a good poet and most of these don't deserve to be published, then I don't think he'll ever want them to be published. But it just blows my mind that all the stuff that he writes that we're reading, the more traditional stuff, that he still has time to do all like he says hundreds of poems. Like some of them might only be 2 or 3 lines, but it just shows you how ingrained, how much of a writing is part of him, that he has time to write poetry outside of the stories that he's doing. It just blows my mind. And I just want to be clear, like, poetry to me is a hard thing to parse. And I understand that some people really like it, but I obviously, if you go to a bookstore or something like that, poetry itself does never really sell that well. I know, but the people that do like it a lot. And hopefully maybe some of the listeners that do like poetry will get back to us to let us know what they thought of this, because I don't think we're the right people to be judging the merits of this story or this piece of work or not, because it's just not something that you and I admittedly are that good at evaluating to begin with. So I'd like to hear from people that do like poetry what they actually think of this piece, if they think it's an effective piece or not. Yeah,
exactly, as you say. We are not qualified to judge if it's a good one or a bad one. So please let us know if you think it's good and why. Okay, moving on. The next story is called Morality and was originally published in Esquire back in 2009. And this is an interesting story. It's about a couple, Chad and Nora, who has a tough time with money. Nora is working as a healthcare person who takes care of people who need help. And Chad is a temp teacher when he's needed or called in to teach classes. They have a very strained economy. They have loans and bills to pay, but not very much money coming in. Chad is working on a book that he hopes, I think he's been talking with an agent who think he can sell the book if it's done, but he estimates that he have about a year left to write on the book. But since he have to take as much work as he can, he don't have much time to work on the book. And then one day, one of the caretaker that Nora has, called Vinny, old judge who is loaded with money. Sorry, not a judge, he's a minister and loaded with money, and he is having a stroke, and a pretty bad one, and he thinks he might die in the not too distant future. And having all money and having a big house and a good career behind him in the church and everything like that, the only thing he hasn't done is commit a sin. And he has an urge to see how that would be, to be on that side of God and having to pray for forgiveness and everything that comes with that. And since he now have that stroke, he can't commit this sin himself. And that's where Nora comes in, and he offers her, I think, about $240,000 to commit a sin. And by paying her to commit a sin, he will commit a sin, and he will see what that is all about. And the sin he wants her to commit is actually walking into a park and punch a kid in the face. And he is very, very specific that she has to draw blood so that the kid is really hurt. And they have to tape it, and he has to get the tape. And when the story starts, we meet up with Chad and Nora, and she has just gotten this suggestion from Winnie, and she brings it up with Chad. And their original or their first decision is, of course, to say no to this. How could they ever do something like this? But the need for money is pressing, and eventually they agree to do this. And it really breaks their marriage, actually, once they have done it, and nothing really turns back to the same. And I don't know if this is supposed to be a morality piece to teach people not to do stuff like this, or what do you think?
Well, I don't think it's not meant to teach you not to do this. It's just meant to explore the paths that you choose in life can lead to further consequences downstream. So something that it's kind of like an addict or something, like, like once you do something once, it might unlock feelings, dark feelings or behaviors that you had always kept in check. And it's sort of like letting a genie out of the bottle. And in the end, what seems like admittedly the initial crime that she does, like hitting a kid to make them bleed, it's a terrible thing. But the priest this guy could have asked for something really terrible. Like he could have, said like maybe kill somebody or cut off a finger or something, it's like something much, much more, a greater sin. So, even though this was a relatively small sin, I guess you could say, it still unlocked some really dark things within both of the husband and wife, though I think the wife, because she was the actual person that did the physical act, it seemed to affect her a lot more. Like the husband pulled back, but basically that's once I think the thrust of the story is that you cannot do something like this in isolation and not think that or believe that you can seal that off and not have it sort of bleed into the rest of your normal life, which is what happens here. So basically this is becomes like a rotten spot, and it continues to spread to the point where they break up. And they might have not had much, but they had each other, and now they've lost that. So it's a pretty sobering tale. The way the couple are presented at the beginning of the story, I almost had a hard time believing that this act could cause this type of behavior, especially in the woman. But I guess that's the whole point of the story is, you might think you could control this, but in actuality you can't. So it's a very sobering, thought-provoking piece. It's an uncomfortable piece, and I think King really hit the bullseye with this one as well.
Yeah, and I think what bothers her the most is not the act itself, but that she did it for money. And I think that is the real problem, I think, that she could be bought to do this. Yeah. But it's interesting to see. You never know what one thing might lead to. That's right.
Yeah. So like you think you take a piece of candy from a store or something like that, or take something without paying for it. It might you might think you can get away with that and it's not going to affect you, but it just might lead to even bigger things, and it will be different for every person, right? So yeah. So even though something might seem like a short-term solution, it might lead to long-term problems.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. And our 10th story is
our ninth.
I thought that was 10.
Only 9. Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry. Our 9th story is Afterlife. And this is King's written. I think he wrote another story about this, Face in the Crowd, which was kind of the same thing, where a guy died, and because he was such a baseball fan, he ended up in some sort of baseball purgatory. Yeah. This one is, if you believe in reincarnation, this story will be right up your alley. And it's basically the story of William Andrews, an investment banker who lived a life, and he made some good decisions and some bad decisions. And when he dies, wakes up in an office building, and he ends up talking to this manager type person who tells him, you have 2 doors that you can go through. You can choose to move on, or if you want a second chance, you can go through this other door and relive your life over and correct the mistakes that you made. And most of everybody always picks they want to try everything all over again because they think that they will be able to change it. And even though the guy tells them that you won't be able to because it's your destiny. So it's take on the Dark Tower thing with Roland, but in that story you're led to believe that Roland will be able to change his fate, whereas in this story we don't think that they will be able to. And if you've done something really bad that you're in denial about, like the manager who apparently owned a business with another person, and they was like a textile mill, and that place burnt down in a fire, and he's first telling us about it, you're led to believe that it was strictly an accident. But as this story goes on, you've come to understand that he actually might have been more responsible for all those people dying than we were initially led to believe. So it's a well-written story, and again, King is able to make you connect with these characters, especially the William Andrews character, as you get into his regrets in life, because you can sort of relate to them yourself. But overall, it's not what I would call a story would stick with me, because it's conventional in how it plays out. So there's no big surprises here. And yeah, it's well written, but it's a pretty straightforward story as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned that it was actually first published in Tin House, 2013. I like this one. I think it's interesting story that there are so many speculations on what happens when you die. And really, no matter what you think will happen when you die, this must be, if this would be the truth, that you ended up where he ends up, it must be very disappointing, because you can choose between wither away, or you can live your life exactly the same way again. Mm-hmm. And I mean, if you had a good life, or mostly good life, that would be good. But I think that most people have one or two things that they really regret, and you would have to live those again, even though the character here actually thinks he will be able to change something or remember something. But as the janitor tells him, this is the 15th time you're here, and you say the same thing every time, this time you're going to remember something. And obviously he doesn't, because he lived the same life over and over again. So it must be kind of frustrating to end up there, that the choices you have is to either wither away or live the same life again. Mm-hmm. No heaven or no hell for those who prefer that. Yeah. But it's just this circle. And I mean, to choose the other part, to just wither away, you would have to be either have a really, really crappy life that you don't want to live again, or you have to, as long as you believe that you can change something or do your life a little bit different to get the perfect life, as long as you think you can do that, you would choose that door, I think. And by not remembering that you had made that choice earlier, you can tell yourself that you can't really be bored with your life, because as far as you know, you had only lived it once, and you have to be pretty boring with it to not live it again and choose the other door. So I think it's a pretty complicated story. Yeah. Or frustrated, maybe. Yeah. Is a better word for the person who ends up there. But I think it's an interesting twist for what happens when you die. And I hope this is not what happens.
No, it's pretty depressing if that's the way it turns out. Yeah.
Yep. And you have to laugh about being the janitor is pretty pretty frustrating. He doesn't have to sleep, he doesn't have to use the bathroom, he doesn't have to eat. I mean, he has a really crappy life now. Mm-hmm. But I think it's a good piece. Okay, moving on to the last one we're going to talk about in this episode, and that is who was published originally in 2009 as a story released by Amazon for their e-reader device called Kindle. And this, if you read the King's intro to this one, he was asked to do a story pretty much as what he did to promote Amazon's Kindle. And at first he turned that down because he didn't have a story or an idea that he thought he could use, and he doesn't write stories on demand either, so he didn't have anything. Mm-hmm. But as he had, when someone had given him that idea, he eventually got a story, he got an idea, and he wrote this, and afterwards he said, okay, here, you can use this if you want to. And they did. But I don't think you can see this really as a promotion piece for Kindle. No. There's one sentence in it where King says, or the character says, that you can buy a lot of books and they aren't cheap. So that could be used like a promotional thing. But otherwise, this is a story, and it just happens to be about a guy who gets a Kindle. He gets it in pink, which really doesn't exist.
Maybe it does now. But,
yeah, maybe it does now. But by 2009, it didn't. Yeah. It only came in white. And this is a literature professor, who has broken up with his girlfriend because she was mad at him because he didn't read online, like on a computer like most people did. And she threw a first edition at him, and he called her a bad word, and they broke up. And the first thing that hit me is that it seemed like a silly reason to break up for. But anyway, that's what they do. And to show her that he can change, he buys this Kindle and he tries to download stuff on it, and he finds this special thing on it where there are 1.4 million which is some kind of alternate realities. And by this device he can enter, or he can, he can buy both books from each of these Earths. And he's searched for books by Hemingway, and he finds in certain Earths there are books that doesn't exist in our life, and books that exist here might not exist there, and it's different all over. And the author has lived different amount of years in the different Earths, and so it's the same, but it's still not the same. There's differences, and the stuff that the author has produced are different in each world. So far everything is good. It's strange, and he thinks he's going crazy, so he shows this to a colleague and a student, mostly because he wants to see if they can see what he sees. So if they don't, he would consider himself crazy. And if they do, he has a terrific gadget that he can read books that no one else can. Mm-hmm. And so far everything is pretty good, but then things starts to happen. When they explore this gadget, they find that they can download newspapers on it. And here we have the same things that with books, that the worlds in these Earths are slightly different. So in one, for example, the Cuba crisis actually happens, so the world is blown to pieces and ends. Mm-hmm. And in other Earths, something else happens. So now it's starting to get a little bit scary, because not all these Earths might still be with us. Yep. And the next thing he finds is that he can download news from the future. And what he finds then is that he's now ex-girlfriend, and she's the captain of their coach for their is it football team? Basketball, yeah. They are on a tour, and coming back they will crash the bus, and I think it's 10 or 11 girls, this teacher included, will die. So now he has to change the future, and that is where the crazy stuff is happening. But he and this student, who also has a girlfriend that's on the bus, finds this woman who actually drives under the influence and is the cause of the accident. And they stop her, and everything seems fine. But what they don't realize that they have done is that they have altered the future and I think that was something that I didn't think of before I read the book, that the people who now survived might be the mother of a new Hitler or something like that. Yep. They might turn into a serial killer or something like that. That is something I hadn't thought about until I read this one, actually, that you get, for everything you do, something happens. Yep. And when he has done this, he gets a visit from the low man in yellow coats that we recognize from the Dark Tower and from Hearts in Atlantis. And this is a connection that this is a Dark Tower story. So I like this one, and I think it was very interesting to see how they alternate the future and what it might have brought. And I would very much like to see a sequel to this one and see what actually happened.
Yeah, that would be tough. Yeah. Who knows? That might show up in another story at some point. But yeah, I really like the story. It's the most science fiction-y one out of the whole collection. I've read this a long time ago, and obviously the Dark Tower ties are very strong in this one. The whole idea of these multi-parallel universes is pretty cool. And I thought it was really funny that the teacher himself Googled himself to see if he ever did write his novel in any universe, and he got 0 hits.
Yep.
So that's got...
He was a failure at 1.4 million
worlds. 1.4 million or billion or whatever it was. But yeah, it's a pretty cool story, and I'm sure King had fun coming up with these new works for Hemingway and all these other writers and pretending to be these other writers and writing little snippets that the the teacher or the student would read. And yeah, it's, what can you say? It's just a fun piece of storytelling, and that I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yeah. And we can mention also that this one is actually revised for this edition.
Yep.
And mostly it's minor stuff, that sentences has been changed or stuff like that. The big thing is that the original story also has a section where they discuss murder of John F. Kennedy,
right,
that plays out different in different Earths. And this part is removed from this one, this new version. And we can only speculate, but it might be because of the 11/22/63 TV show that's coming, that King thought it would be too much to have it here as well, and that he says everything he wants to says about it in that one, maybe, or maybe he just wanted to shorten it, and that was a good section to remove.
Yeah, and just outside of that, if you are a writer, it's interesting to take that earlier version, compare it to this one, kind of like the two versions of The Dark Tower, and you can see that, like every writer, if you get the opportunity to rewrite a piece, you could endlessly revise it with never being done. So the writers are always looking for ways to find that perfect combination of words and letters to tell their story. And King is no different than any other writer. So from that perspective, it's interesting to see, because some of the changes are really minor. And does it make the story better? Yeah. To be honest, I didn't remember any differences between the two stories when I read this version. So did it tell the story better? I guess, but it didn't really change my enjoyment of the story. So
no, I think that the removal of the murder of John F. Kennedy might have differed the story a bit. Now we know that 11/22/63 is coming, but I think that it's an event that essentially everyone recognize and know a little bit about, and it's something that you can twist it to happen in different ways. So I think it would have been good to keep it, to show that the Earths were very different.
Yeah.
I don't think it maybe not necessary, but I think it would have been, I think it could have been kept in. I think it would have been more useful than not to keep it in, I think.
I'm 6 of one, half a dozen of the other on that, because if you start looking up the various versions of what happened after Kennedy was assassinated or not assassinated, if you've read this before you read 11/22/63, it could take the tension out of that story, because in 11/22/63 you don't know what's going to happen. And in this one you would kind of say, well, he wrote about this in another story and it has to be either A, B, C, or D. So I think he just wanted to keep the mystery of the 11/22/63, keep the mystery as strong as he could without this story undermining it in any way. And I thought the Cuban Missile Crisis was just as a valid exercise of alternative history comparisons as using the JFK assassination. So it's really not a problem, but I don't think it would have been necessary to remove. But one other thing that King's changed a little bit here is that when it was first released, people didn't know what the Kindle was, and now most people do. So I think he's changed a little bit of words to make it more natural, that they know what a Kindle is, and it's not such a big deal as it might have been in the first version. So it's been a little bit updated, you can say. It's happened a lot in the last 6 years when it comes to ebook readers, so I think that's a smart move. Yep. Okay, and that is the first 10 stories in the Bazaar of Bad Dreams. Cool.
In the next episode, we're going to talk about the remaining 10, which include the 2 new stories. In this entire collection, there are only 2 new stories, and the poem, The Bone Church, I think hasn't been published before as well. If you don't want to count Bad Little Kid, that hasn't been published in English before. Right. For the next time, we're going to talk about the last 10 stories. So if you have any comments or thoughts about those, if there's maybe some you like extra much or some you don't like at all, please let us know. It will be interesting to see. I think also that we will have to pick our favorite story of the entire book, right?
Okay.
Can you do that?
Can, but that will be for the next podcast, right?
Yeah, that will be for the next podcast, So you have 2 weeks to think about it.
All righty. Good stuff. I hope you guys all found that enjoyable, and be interested to hear if your favorite stories so far are our favorite ones as well. And once again, anybody that's into poetry, please send us your comments about that one specifically, because we'd really be interested in hear what the poetry experts think about it. So now we are going to turn to TV, and we're going to talk about episodes 14 through 20 of season 5, or as I like to think of them, as episodes 1 through 6 of season 6. Because as we've mentioned in previous podcasts, I think Hans totally nailed it as to why they keep calling it season 5, because if they didn't, they probably would have had to renegotiate everybody's contract, which would have added to the cost of the series. But in any event, we left off last season with Mara revealing her true intentions about what she wanted to do to Haven, and then Charlotte showed up. By the end of the season, she realized that she would not be able to reform her from her ways, so she decided to allow Audrey's personality to remain behind, and she got rid of Mara. So at the end of in the last episode, Audrey is back, but Mara was around long enough to plant some troubles, and a lot of them, into Duke. So at the last moments of mid-season finale, Duke basically explodes and vomits out a whole bunch of ether from his eyes and his mouth and whatnot. And this ends up with Haven being surrounded by a cloud or a fog bank, a circular barrier around the whole town. And we pick it up from that point in the start of this new season that started airing. When did it start airing? It was October 8th. All the troubles that are in the Haven area have now been concentrated within the town. So it becomes very much a sort of like a zombie siege series for a little while, and all the town people are forced for reasons of safety to gather together in the school, one of the nearby schools. And Charlotte and Audrey are trying to find a way to cure all the troubles, and Duke is pretty messed up with what's been happening to him, so he actually leaves Haven. And his real purpose for leaving Haven is to find a girl who has a trouble that allows for the creation of thinnies. And even though there's an episode in there that I really like, and I'll let you talk about that a bit more, Hans, I really felt that his part of the season was a lot of wheel spinning, just waiting until the story inside Haven was ready for this character that could do thinnies to come into play. So I wasn't a really big fan of what Duke was doing for a lot of the season. And of course we have Audrey and them trying, and the Edge. I can never remember his name in the show. I just call him the Edge. They're trying to get rid of the troubles. And we also have the two brothers, Dave and Vincent are following up this whole Croatoan sub-story, which eventually becomes more and more of a major storyline as we get through the first 6 episodes of this season. So there's a lot of things are going on at the same time, and you've got a lot of the cast separated from each other over this time period. So it's kind of almost like Lord of the Rings. After the Fellowship of the Rings, everybody's sort of split off for the next 2 movies, and they don't really come back until the end. And it looks like we're in the same storyline mode here as well. But I think I've covered most of the major points. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention, Hans?
Yeah, did you mention that there was a big fog surrounding Haven that didn't let anybody leave? Yeah.
I don't know if Duke was the only one that could leave, or did they try to leave? I can't remember now. It's been a while.
Yeah, he was the only one who could leave because he was immune to the troubles. Everyone else who went out through the fogs came back like they had just done a U-turn and came back in. I think someone was trying to drive a car through, and he just popped out again and run someone over.
Yeah, so it's like under the dome.
Yeah.
So they're trapped in there. So the series returned on October 8th, and there was a double episode that night. There was New World Order and Power, and that was the one where we found out that Charlotte was Mara's mother. And so those 2 episodes set up this season pretty good. This back half of the season 5 pretty good. I quite like those episodes. Then we got to the trial of Nathan Warnos, which I really thought was a waste of an hour.
Yeah, I agree. And personally, I really dislike when it gets like this cheesy, if you can call it that, where someone like Nathan did this time, he just got up there and everybody was mad at him, and he started to talk and getting them to understand that you have to live together and they have to help each other and blah, 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 everything like that.
Which is probably the most fantastical element of the show done so far, because people just don't change that quickly, right?
No, and when I see stuff like that, I just want to puke. So I don't. It's not realistic. It never happens like that. So
and it really irritates me in a way, because the guy whose girl had left back in the pit with the ether, all the points he were bringing up were right. Like Duke and Audrey and Nathan will do anything to save each other, even at the cost of other people's lives. So it's he's really guilty of the crimes that he's being accused of. But somehow the people are able to forgive him, which doesn't make any sense when you think about it just for a little bit. So that sort of stuff doesn't. I understand what they're trying to do, but when you look at it a little closely, it just doesn't really make any sense. Like, these people should really be mad. They're not.
Yeah,
that's fine for you you'll do anything to save Audrey, but if I want to save my girlfriend, then oh no, we have to do what's best for the town. Like, they're kind of hypocritical on that aspect. So that wasn't handled well in my mind.
No, and I think what I like with this season so far is that I think it feels more like it's one long episode where everything is connected and everything is continuing from one episode to another, and all the different problems that's in each episode are somehow connected to the big thing. I remember earlier seasons when there could be episodes that felt like they could have been placed anywhere in this series or seasons. It didn't matter. But here we have a much more continuance in the seasons.
Yes, it's very heavily serialized now.
Yeah.
And this is the benefit of knowing that you have an end date beforehand, so they can really focus on closing out the story properly, much like Lost had, as opposed to Under the Dome, which didn't know how long it was going to go, and because of that, it couldn't really be consistent in its storytelling. So you can really see the difference between Haven and Under the Dome. One show had an end date, the other one was going to try to go as long as it could, and it didn't know when it had an end date.
No.
And because of that, the storytelling suffered, because they had to come up with new problems all the time.
Yeah, and I think the reason also that they brought Duke outside of Haven is to get some relief from Haven, because it's very focused, and because it's so serialized, as a series is right now, they need to have something else come in between, because otherwise it will be too slow, I think, and they need
and too much of one tone.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of what the stuff that was happening with Duke outside of Haven was more lighthearted.
Yeah.
The girl robbing the bank, and then of course in Enter Sandman, which I think is probably my most favorite episode so far, where this guy touches you and you go into a dream, and Audrey is thinking that she's going to get married and all this stuff, which was kind of cool. But then Duke hooked up with Seth from an earlier season episode, though, the Dark Side Seeker guy that was like Ghost Hunters.
Yeah.
And it was kind of funny that, when he got a little too far away from Duke, he would forget about Duke, because outside of Haven, nobody remembers Haven anymore, and none of Duke's background checks out. Like, he's trying to withdraw money from the bank, and they tell him that he doesn't exist and Haven doesn't exist and all this. So it's kind of funny that this Seth guy would come back and forth and keep forgetting who Duke was, and they'd have to sort of start all over again.
Yeah, I really liked how he struggled to get him to remember, and just as he did, and they were going to drive away, which was just going into the gas station to buy something, and then when he came back, he was just like, "Oh, how are you, and why are you hanging on my car?" They had to start all over again. I think that was great.
Yeah, so that was, so far, it's been my favorite episode of these episodes. The next couple, we're back to dealing with Charlotte and Audrey, trying to focus on how to gather all this ether together so that they can get rid of the troubles forever. And it's frustrating that Audrey says she has a plan, or Charlotte has a plan, but we never find out what that plan is. Like, It's that's a stalling thing in TV that I just find irritating. And what else do we have here? People are starting to be killed.
Yeah, Charlotte dies.
Charlotte dies.
Yeah.
And she's one of the ones that's attacked by this mysterious killer.
Yeah.
Duke meets some person who we don't know who is. I don't know if it's an ancestor of his that basically fills him in on his backstory of his family, going all the way back to the original colony where the Croatoan name came from.
Yeah.
And he sees a vision of Haven's future where everybody's dead, which is one of the things that prompts Duke to start thinking about going back to Haven.
Yeah.
And then we come up to my second favorite episode, was just passing through, where Nathan and Vince go back to 1983, and this ties back into the Colorado Kid. So we get to see the other version of Audrey again, and her son.
Yeah.
And then we find out that Croatoan has been using Dave from time to time to carry out things, and he uses Dave to kill. What was it? Was it Sarah? Was that her? That version of Audrey? Was that her name? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
Sarah. That he uses Dave to kill her son.
Yeah. Colorado Kid.
Yeah, the Colorado Kid. So yeah. I thought that was all pretty cool and pretty well done. So that was my second favorite episode, and that brought us up to episode 20.
Yeah, and I like time traveling in movies, and I like this one. And did you see it coming that Dave would be involved?
Well, we've had a lot of hints about it because he's been in the void before.
Yeah. And
couldn't remember why. So the fact that it was Croatoan that was controlling him, I guess, was a bit of a surprise. But because I always thought of Croatoan as more of a place than a person, right? So
yeah.
At this point, they've sort of worked it in that this Croatoan seems to be a being of some type.
Yeah.
So it takes away the mystery. Like, obviously, if you've read the Colorado Kid book, that's a mystery that's never solved. And they solve it in the TV series this way, which is cool. And it fits in with the mythology of Haven, but I think I prefer that in the book that we never really find out why or how that person got from point A to point B and was killed and all that stuff. But now we've been given an explanation, and it's okay. It works well within this mythology of the show, and you just have to treat that part of it separately from the book.
Yeah, I think the TV show is already so distant from the book that I see a point in them connecting the fact that we find out who the killer is here, and it all started like 5 or 6 seasons, depending on how we count it, ago. And I think that they tie it together in a nice way. So I don't really mind that we find out who is here, because it doesn't affect the book, because they have moved away from the book so much already. So
right.
I think most people see this as separate from the book by now. So I'm totally cool with that, and I think it's a good thing that we get to know who it is.
Yeah. But so overall, so far this season, like you mentioned already, Hans, I do like the serialized nature of the show, and it really has a feeling of momentum, and that we're going towards a climax. Questions are being answered. Some new ones are being raised, as always. But in general, you get the feeling that the show is going somewhere now, and that it's racing towards some sort of final conclusion, which is good. And it just gives the show more focus now, because it doesn't have to worry about creating filler episodes. Instead, it can concentrate on, reaching the end point. And the only thing I would say out of these episodes, if you throw out the Trial of Nathan episode, you wouldn't be missing anything with that episode almost. There's a couple of things in there, but they're pretty minor, and you can easily pick them up from the following episodes. So, but the other episodes were good. It's good stuff. And again, it's pretty amazing how well the character, especially the leads, have become comfortable with their characters. Especially is it Emma? I can't remember. Whoever plays Audrey, I think she's really improved the most out of anybody in terms of becoming comfortable with her character. So, good job. I'm quite enjoying it, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how they're going to wrap this all up.
Yeah, one thing I like about the fact that they know this is the last episodes is that actually anything can happen.
Yeah.
They can kill often one of the main characters if they want to, because there's only a few episodes left, and they can survive that. If they were planning on doing like 2 or 3 more seasons, they couldn't do that. So I think that makes it more interesting. And
it raises the stakes.
Yeah, exactly. And I would like to make a guess, and I think that Duke is going to die, and Nathan and Audrey is going to survive, and Duke is going to sacrifice himself for their survival.
Yeah, like you, and like the best of King stories, victory comes with a price. And I like those stories the most, that bittersweet triumph. And I agree with you. It's either it's going to be Duke saves the town, or Nathan and Audrey sacrifice themselves and save the town. And maybe, who knows, maybe Nathan and Audrey go into the barn together for forever and ever and become like the new couple, but this time they're going to have nice troubles, or helpful troubles, instead of bad ones. And Duke maybe the family curse for Duke would be broken, and he can actually live a normal life and pick up. But I think it'll be, it's either one or the other. Either Duke dies and Nathan and Audrey live, or Nathan and Audrey sacrifice themselves and Duke lives. So, but I'm not sure which way they're going to go. I'm kind of thinking it would be nicer to have Duke survive and rid of his troubles. But knowing you, Hans, I think you want somebody to die.
Yeah, I would actually. I think I would like something like they do something and they think they have beaten all the troubles. Like maybe Duke or one of them is sacrificing themselves to save the town. And everybody is sad that the one who sacrifices himself is dead, but they are happy that the town is now safe. And just as before this episode ends, we see that the town isn't safe at all. It's all starting again, and it was all for nothing.
You are a twisted man.
Yep.
Well, I'm sure they'll leave it open for a sequel somehow. So just in case, like 20 years from now, they want to go, Haven, the next generation, or something like that.
Yeah.
Anyhow, looking forward to the back half of this season, and probably by the time we do our next podcast, the series will have been completed, and we will be able to give you our thoughts on those episodes and the series as a whole.
Yes.
Alrighty. And now to the main event.
Yes.
Do you want to set it up, or do you want me to?
I can set it up.
Okay.
What has happened now is that we have a casting news for The Dark Tower. And as we said in the news, this is only a rumor. And the rumor is that Idris Elba is set to play Roland. And this was quite interesting, because I posted this news this last Friday on my site. And when I posted it, I'm not a fan of him in this role. We can reveal that. And I was a bit skeptic and thought this won't work, but I didn't think that much about it actually. But the internet exploded with people who, some thought that it was a good thing, some thought it was a bad thing, some who thought it was a good thing was mad at the people who thought it was a bad thing, and the other way around. And the discussions has just exploded, and both on the good and the bad side, we can say that in some forums, the discussions have been very civilized and very enjoyable to read, I think, both for those who agree with what I think and those who don't. And in other places, the discussions have been quite ugly and quite unnecessary, I think. People are being quite nasty in their approach to stuff.
Yeah.
So the first thing is, I'm very surprised that people are reacting as strong as they are. I mean, after all, it's only casting.
Yeah.
It's not world starvation or something like that. So I think in some ways it's the proportion of this has just gone outside what's reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an interesting discussion.
Yep.
I know you, Lou, you are not agreeing with me, and you think he would be right for the role.
Yeah. I just want to add on to what you're talking about there with some of the reactions to this. I mean, this is awesome, obviously, for us for podcasting purposes, that we're on opposite sides of this issue. But that doesn't mean that, and hopefully, we will still be able to do further podcasts after this. I mean, we're not going to start calling each other's names. We have a different viewpoint on this. And so this discussion is strictly a food for thought discussion. We're both going to put forth ideas, hopefully, that for people on both sides can take away and think about, and maybe it'll change your mind. Maybe it won't. Maybe it'll just strengthen your position further. Who knows? But because if there's one thing I think we've all learned over the years is it's very rare that you can get into a discussion on the internet and you're going to change somebody else's opinion about something. Yeah. So the best you can do is just put your thoughts out there and respect the opinions of other people that don't agree with you. And like Hans, I've been casting a net over the internet and we're going to try to incorporate as many points that were being raised in the various forums that we've visited into this discussion. So I would like to kick it off by actually taking a step back from this particular casting news and let's start at the 50,000 foot level and work our way down. So one of the things that I think that we can all agree upon is any adaptation of any book is going to go through changes when it becomes to the screen, just by the fact that movies are a different medium of telling stories than books are. Books allow you much more internalized journeys of the characters. Movies have to do that same journey through external cues, whether it's in the photography or the lighting, the pacing of action, how, the angles that they shoot things at. So they tell stories in a different way. So, and especially in a 7-book series where at the most you're going to get 14, maybe 16 hours. We don't know what the plans are either, if they're still going to do like the TV series combined with the movies aspect. So even if they had 30 hours, you're not going to be able to include a lot of the subtext that is in movies, or that is possible with books. So a lot of that is going to get dropped or compressed. And most of the issues I'm seeing being raised are what I call window dressing issues. It's like the color of a person's clothes or the type of clothes he wears or somebody's name or where something takes place. None of these are changed or dropped. Lord of the Rings dropped a whole section of the book, the Tom Bombadil story, but the movies kept the core of the themes of the book. And that is, I think, the most important thing with any adaptation, because a lot of times, like if you look at the Shawshank Redemption, for the sake of the movie, they compressed all the wardens into one character. And I think that made that work quite well. And I've seen, and this is a slippery slope, because some people are, like, we all have favorite parts of the stories that we want to keep. So it's a difficult job, and everybody's reaction is going to be subjectively different, because we all like certain parts of the stories more than other people do. And you'll never get consensus on what's your favorite part of a book or a story or anything like that. So that's a slippery slope. But one of the silliest examples to me, which was like on the way on the right, is somebody said, well, he's got to have blue eyes, because there's a line in the book where he's got those blue bombardier eyes. But there's no guarantee if they cast a white actor that he's going to have blue eyes. So does that mean the movie's ruined because he doesn't have blue eyes? I mean, this is the kind of slope that you can get on, right? If you get too entrenched in these little things, like, because if his eyes are green or blue, are you going to tell me that that's going to ruin the movie? Like, I don't see that. And then somebody, of course, and somebody says, well, he'll wear contacts. And I said, well, yeah, but anybody can wear contacts. It doesn't matter what color their skin is, right? So we have to keep these kind of adaptational issues in mind when we're talking about this. Yeah. So do you have anything that you want to add to that point, Hans? Are you in agreement with what I'm saying, or?
Yes, I am. I agree with what you say, that there are going to be difference. And I must say that when I was younger, I was more sensitive to changes. I wanted everything to be exactly as it was in the book, or it was bad. But the older I've become, the more I've accepted that there will be difference, and there will be stuff that actually works better if it's changed. And we have good examples on where that has actually worked. That, like for the Mist movie, they changed the ending. I love that ending, but if someone would have told me before they made that movie that they are going to do a different ending, I would probably have been against that. and that turned out good. So you never know what is going to be the result, and it may very well be that Elba is, if he is doing this, it might be a great movie or a great TV show. I'm not saying that it is that, but what I have always been against is when they do change stuff that they change for no apparent reason.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
and there might be a reason why his name has come up to the top of the list. But
there might be, exactly, but we haven't gotten any good reason for that as far as I know. But I mean, I read that there was one script for the Talisman where Jack Sawyer would have been a girl.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one thing that it would probably not have changed anything in the story.
Right.
It would work exactly as good if it was a boy or a girl. It wouldn't matter.
And I'll go out. I'll say it to you right now. You could make Roland a woman, and still it's not going to change the story significantly. The main journey of that character will not change because of his sex, or of the character's sex, not just his skin color. I mean, there's going to be different flavors of the story, but that quest to get to the Dark Tower, that's still going to be there.
But let's toy with the idea that they would change Roland to a girl.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have to ask yourself, why would they do that?
Right.
I mean, either they think that would work better than the version King wrote, where Roland is a man,
mm-hmm.
or they had found an actress who they felt that no male actor could do the role as good as this female actor.
Right. And it could just be during this particular window of production that they want to start shooting the movie, that person just happens to be the best choice for the role. Like there might be better actors out there that they would love to get, but they're tied up in other projects and they're not going to be available during the production window. So then they have to, you can only cast people that are available. You can't say, yeah, I'd love to get Daniel Day-Lewis, but he's either busy just wants to be a cobbler, or he's actually filming a movie somewhere else. A studio is not going to invest millions and millions of dollars in a film project just so that they can piss off a bunch of people or to push in a political agenda. That doesn't make any sense.
No.
So, and we'll get to it in a bit, but a lot of times these names come up because the people that are available at that time happen to be the best people that are available. I mean, 6 months from now, and these situations are very fluid. 6 months from now, could get a story that says the actors that we thought might get these roles are now signed up for other projects, so therefore they're no longer in the running for these roles. I mean, that's just the business.
Yeah, but I must say that I have a hard time buying that reason, because I don't think that he is I don't think that there aren't any other actor that would be more Roland-like, if you want to call it that, than he is.
Well, I guess
available.
it just comes back again to what do you mean by Roland-like? Are you just talking about skin color? Because that's only one aspect of the character. No. So can you expand on what you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to make it totally clear that, and I know King posted on Twitter that color of the gunslinger doesn't matter. And I would like to say also that the color of the gunslinger doesn't matter to me. What matters is that in book 2, when he draws Detta or Odetta,
mm-hmm.
She has a hate for him because he's a white man and she's a black woman, and everyone who's read the book knows about that. And I think that is quite big part of the book, and I think that that is something that would be lost if they changed it. I think that is something that needs to be in the book, and for that to work, Elba would not be the right Roland. So it really doesn't have anything to do that he is black. It has that he isn't right for the story, and I think that is a major part of the story in that book. And I don't want that to change, and because of that, I think he isn't the right Roland.
Right. Okay. I've seen that point being raised by a lot of people. To me, that relationship between Roland and Odetta, the racial aspect of the tension between them it's a window dressing item. It's a flavor of their relationship. The main tension between them is she doesn't want to be there. She wants to go somewhere else, and Roland is preventing her from getting there. That is the main source of their conflict. The racial thing is just a flavor of it. And if they cast according to the source material, there's no guarantee that we're going to get that aspect of their relationship in the movie. The people making the movie might say, you know what, this whole thing between Roland and Odetta, this is going to make a lot of people angry. So we don't even need that part of the story or that relationship in there. We just need to keep the tension between them that she wants to get away and Roland's not going to let her go. On the other hand, I also think if they are of the same color, and if Roland comes from a world where, because this is the great thing about the whole Dark Tower series, there's many other worlds. He could come from a line of Eld where they could be all one color, like they are in the one that we traditionally think of, or they could be mixed races in there. It could even be both genders. So the Dark Tower mythology has the flexibility to allow for any different combinations of storylines to be possible. But let's say that we go with this Idris Elba idea. Racial bigotry or racial tension is that's only one form of prejudice. They could easily substitute another type of prejudice and still keep that tension between them. And somebody's posted that you can't have bigotry between people of the same race, which I think is totally wrong. I mean, the tension that's in the book is based on their skin color, but within the same race, you can have tensions about social classes or religious backgrounds or economic backgrounds. And let's say that Roland comes from a world where skin color is irrelevant. So he would just, as a gunslinger, he would just walk around feeling probably maybe even not, if not equal, probably superior to the average person. And Odetta, if she's, comes from our world, she'll still be locked into that particular time and point in history. If she sees Roland acting just like to what her seems like a white person, she would probably be even more upset with him, because not only is he keeping her, but he's acting like he's better than her. And I think you could really play with that. I think there's a lot more rich ground because of that. So I understand that this is a big thing for a lot of people, but I think there's a lot of potential to play this in so many different ways, and still, yes, it'll be a different flavor, but I still think the tension will be there, and there's a lot of possibilities to play this maybe even better than what's in the book. And again, I have to repeat, just because they cast the characters, if they cast the characters to source, there's still no guarantee that flavor of their relationship might survive. It might be one of the things they can say, like I said before, this might be too controversial, or they're going to say, you know what? We don't have time in the movie to carry out this aspect of the relationship. All we need to get across is that Odetta's trying to get away and Roland won't let her. So there's no right or wrong in this situation. I'm just offering up a different possibilities of how this could play out. So I don't think it needs to be stuck on that one thing about skin color.
Yeah, but what I think it comes down to, based on what you're saying now, is that if they would cast Elba for this role, they would have to change a few things based on the books and how it plays out in the books.
They're going to have to change them anyhow.
Yeah, but I think that what I want is the main thing I want is for the movie to be as much as the book as possible. And then again, it comes back to me, why change it if you doesn't have to? If you want to cast Elba in this movie and that in itself make you have to change stuff from the book, wouldn't it be better to take someone else that you wouldn't have to change? Even if you change for some other reason as well. But what I want is for them to be, or try at least, to be as close to the book as they can. Because if they change stuff, then they change stuff and it won't be following King's book, and then they can basically do whatever they want because they have diverted from it. But if I would make a wish, I would wish them to keep it as close to the books as possible, and then to hire someone that you would have to change the stuff to make it work. Then I would rather see them take someone else and not have to change. They might change anyway, but they wouldn't have to change it to fit that person into the role.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
No, that's a valid point. And again, subjectively, each person is going to place different value on how important certain aspects of the story are. But for myself, if I look at that relationship, if that relationship is not covered in the movie or taken out, it even if it was like if it was taken out of the book, it changes the flavor of their relationship, but it doesn't affect the overall story arc. There's no guarantee that if they cast a source that you're going to keep a lot of these subtleties or flavors of the relationship. There might be a lot of things change just based on the cast. You get two actors. No two actors are going to play the same role the same way. So every actor that comes in, it really comes down to the people that are overseeing the project, who are writing the scripts. It's up to them to determine what are the major themes of the story that we want to capture. That's why it's called an adaptation. Some things are going to get dropped. Some things are going to get changed. Some things should not be changed. And it is up to the people behind the scenes to try to have a vision that captures the themes. I mean, if anybody's read Lord of the Rings, to me is like the best example. The movies are fairly different than the books, but the overall themes are there. And in some instances, I think the movies do a better job of what was in the source material. So, I mean, it's an adaptation. It's going to change. For some people, this relationship not changing is very important, but there's no guarantee that it's going to be what you wanted, no matter who they cast. So, I understand your point. I'm just offering things to think about that might happen regardless of who's cast in these roles.
Yeah, and I mean, we have examples on where changing stuff has been good and changing stuff has been bad. Yeah. Like I said, I like the new ending of The Mist better. To
me, the best example is if we had this viewpoint with The Shawshank Redemption, then Morgan Freeman never would have got the role of Red. I mean, Red is an Irish character, but the movie handles it for and one of the funniest moments in the movie is this, why do they call you Red? And he says, maybe because I'm Irish. Like, I just thought that was awesome. And they're respecting the source material. Yeah. But, and unfortunately, since this movie came out, it's almost become like a joke now that anything is narrated, it has to be done in the Morgan Freeman style of narration. But for that movie, that casting choice made that the movie is better than the book. And one of the reasons is because of the casting of Morgan Freeman in that role. And some people say, well, that's different because that's a short story and he's not an important character. And I'm going, he's the main character of the story. What are you talking about? The fact that he's Irish or black doesn't change that story. I mean, that story is not about Andy DeFries. It's about Red learning to accept who he is. And Andy supplies him with the inspiration to be at peace with himself, at least to the point where he's done his time, and when he leaves that jail, he's got something to look forward to. So, like, to me, that's the classic example of Morgan Freeman getting that role. If we lived in this day and age, and we were getting this announcement about there's going to be a Shawshank Redemption movie, and Morgan Freeman's going to play the role of Red. What do you think? Do you think the reaction is going to be any different than what we're seeing now for this latest casting in news?
No, I think it would have been the same, and I think I would probably feel the same way I do now. And that is, and I'm not saying anything about that because we never know. Sometimes these things work out to the best, and sometimes, like say, Under the Dome is another great example on where they didn't work out, and where even Stephen King himself talked about the changes and said that they had to be done and everything, but still this series sucked. So you never know until it's done, really, if it's going to work or not. But my My main thing is that I think that you shouldn't change more than necessary, and to change what at least I see as an important part of the plot, just to get this specific actor. I don't see why that would have to happen, because I don't think that he's the only one that they could cast, and I don't think that there isn't anyone else who would work as Roland. So I don't think that this is a change that
of course not.
Has to be done.
Yeah.
If it is, it might be a success. It might work out perfectly, and we might, in say a couple of years, we'll be sitting here talking about, oh man, how could I believe that this was wrong? Yeah. Or we might be sitting here and saying, oh my God, how could they cast him? Yeah. They ruined the entire series. We won't know, but I think that if you're going to change it, you're going to have a good reason to change it. Otherwise, leave it be.
Yeah. And I'm sure the studio does, because they have to know that this is going to be a controversial announcement to make.
Yeah, but sometimes I get the feeling that the studio want a name that will draw attention to the movie. And now I don't mean that they are drawing attention because they are casting a black man for a white role, but he is a big actor. And of course, people will be interested in this if he is included. And I think that could be the reason why they are doing it. And I think that would be totally wrong. Reason. I mean,
again, we don't know who's available right now, and we have all we can go is, back to my original point. Studios do not invest millions of dollars in a project and then miscast it just to make fans angry. They're trying to make the best decision that they can do from a artistic and business thing. And I mean, like, Elba certainly has some attractive qualities to him, because he's never had a franchise, he's not part of a big franchise film right now. Like, he definitely has the charisma and the moxie to carry off this role. And like, if you drop a list of 10 actors, I think on a lot of people's, just the best actors, just say to anybody, give me your top 10 male actors out there right now. I think on a lot of people's list is Idris Elba will be in that top 10 somewhere. Now, the problem is, if you start going through that list, and right off the bat, maybe half of them are already unavailable because either they don't want to commit themselves to a long project like this, or they're doing work somewhere else. So you have to start going down and looking at the other candidates. And is it a sound decision to overlook a candidate on his qualities strictly because he's not 100% fit for a role, or do you ignore him and jump down to the B pool and pick for somebody else from that because they physically fit the role better? You always go for the best talent for a job. All things being equal, you go for the best person for the job, and that trumps anything else of any consideration. I mean, if Stephen King says he's okay with Roland being of a different race or whatever, we don't have to agree with that. But he owns the character and the story, and he knows it better than us. And he says he doesn't have an issue with that. And, based on his other works and for what I've seen, then that works for me. I mean, I've seen some people say, well, he knows which, he's doing it either because he's saying that because if he doesn't, then there's going to be like backlash against him, or he's doing it because he wants for financial reasons. But at this stage of his life, I think King's got enough money. I don't think that this extra pile of money is the guy writes because he creates because he wants to create. The money is definitely nice. And of course he's not going to deny or look away from collecting payment for his work. But I think if anybody checks his Twitter account, he's not afraid of speaking his mind. Like if he thought it was, to me, I believe him when he says that he doesn't have an issue with this possibility. I'm wondering, what do you think of that?
Well, I think that he did say that it didn't matter, but that isn't the same as he saying that he think it's a good or a bad idea. I think it's a very neutral.
It's okay.
Neutral, answer to that question. He really doesn't say that he think it's good or bad. He says it doesn't matter. So I don't think he's picking a side here, really. But even though if he would say right out that this is a good choice, he has been wrong. He was very supportive of Under the Dome, which we both think is not the best thing that's done.
Yeah, and his version of The Shining wasn't very good either. Yeah, so it's like, he's human, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't think you have to agree with him. I know I don't. If his answer indicates that he thinks Elba is the right person to play Roland, I don't agree with him, and I don't think you have to. I mean, he's one person. Yeah,
but the difference here is he owns and created these characters and stories. So it's the same situation we have with George Lucas. Everybody says Han shot first, but George Lucas says no, he didn't. Nobody likes that answer, but that's the way he ended up filming it. And you can agree or disagree with him, but he owns that property. He made that decision, and you can disagree with him all you want, but Han still did not shoot first. So if King says it doesn't matter, you don't have to agree with him, but that's what it is. So that's all I'm saying. He owns the story. So if he didn't want this to happen, he would say that. He might do that behind closed doors, but I don't think he would. If you cannot provide a reason why a character has to be of a specific makeup, there's no justification there. If any person can play this role, unless there's a specific need for the actor to be, or the character to be of a certain background that's integral to the character or helped form the character's outlook on the world, then the role should be open to anybody. And I think that's all King is saying. He says the main important things, he protects his quartet and then he can draw fast.
Yeah.
That the other stuff is already there in the story. So I take King at his word, and I find it hard to believe when people say, well, that he's just doing it for the money reasons. If you really believe that, how can you read his books and enjoy them if you know that he just sells out for money? Which I just don't buy that at all.
No, on that part I agree with you. I think he says what he thinks. I don't think he says it because he doesn't want to upset the studio or anything. I think he says what he thinks. Absolutely. I don't think anything else, but I actually don't agree with him. I think it matters. And I think it matters because of as I mentioned, the relationship between Roland and Odetta. Mm-hmm. And I know it could be changed, but as I said, I like the way it is in the book. And if it ain't broken, why fix it? So I don't see, and that is my main problem here actually is.
And if you can make it better, why not change it?
Yeah, but you don't know. You don't know that it's going to be better.
That's the flip side. You don't know until you try, right?
No, but you know that. I mean, I got that as well. But I bet that's what the people who did Lawnmower Man said as well. You don't know if it's going to be better if you try it.
That's an apples to orange comparison. Like I see people doing this a lot. Like they say, well, if they're going to do that with the Dark Tower, then I guess we can, make Peter Parker Asian or whatever like that. I mean, you have to judge each story separate from another one. You don't take two kids and say you're both going to do the same thing. They're two different people with different makeup characteristics. Each story is a different animal unto itself. So you cannot say that just because you make a change in one story, then that means that decision goes across the board and every other story now has to apply that same logic. You know what I mean?
I agree totally on that. But
yeah, so that to me, that's one of the most frustrating things I see is when people say, well, if they're going to do that, then why don't they do this or do that? Well,
yeah, and I've seen.
Well, you have to look at that situation. Does it make sense? Or does the story allow that? Can you do the story by making the change? So yeah, that argument doesn't hold a lot for me. And the other one that really bugs me is, I don't know who Idris Elba is, but I think it's a bad decision.
Yeah.
How can you say that? That is prejudice. If you don't take the time to research the actor who's being considered for role before you say something like that, that's what prejudice is all about. Making a judgment with no facts.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm up on Elba is because I know this guy. I've seen him in Luther. I've seen him in The Wire. this guy kicks ass. I'm sitting here thinking to myself, like, let's say we get these rumors prove true. Matthew McConaughey versus Idris Elba. Are you kidding me? That would be a kick-ass movie. Like, those two guys are amazing actors, and that's the thing. Like, if whoever you cast for one of these characters, the other actor has to be able to hold his own against him. And I think that these two actors, if they were both cast for these roles, this movie, especially the Dark Tower, that movie would rock, like, big time. These are two big actors, both very charismatic, playing off of each other. That would be
but maybe
a
not
sight
in
to
the
see on the big screen.
But I have a problem with that. I don't know. I mean, we are treading somewhat dangerous water because we're talking about black and white here. But I want to make it absolutely clear that I'm not prejudiced, and that is really not at all a reason why I don't. So. If I'm going to make an example, like if they would cast a girl as Jake, for example, that would probably work as well, because Jake doesn't have to be a boy. But in the 7 books, he is a boy, and I like that. And I would be as against him being cast as a girl for that reason.
Yeah, and I think you could make an argument that a father-son relationship is different than a father-daughter relationship or a mother-daughter relationship. Each one of those has different dynamics with them, and I could see the argument for keeping it a father-son relationship.
Yeah, but even if you scale everything else away, but the fact that Jake is a boy in those 7 books, why would you change it to a girl? What is the reason? And as far as I'm concerned, I think that it works well with him being a boy. Why would you change it to be a girl? And I can't see a good reason to do that. And then I don't want them to change it. And it's the same with Elba. I mean, he's a good actor, and he has done great roles, but he isn't right, as far as I can see, as Roland. So why you say you have to get the best actors, but I don't agree with that in this case, because you can have an actor that is very, very good, but he or she might not be the right one for a certain role for a certain reason.
Right.
And that doesn't really make the actor or actress any less good. But
no.
I mean, you have actors that are good in some parts, but not in some parts. And that really doesn't have anything to do with how good or bad they are in their profession.
Yeah.
It's just that you don't if you're going to have some one-legged man, you don't hire a two-legged actor, no matter how good he is.
Well, you could always take his leg off with special effects.
Yeah.
But no, I know what you're saying. Yeah, I agree. Like, there's some actors that are just so tied to a time period. Like, there's some actors that can play like a modern-day character, but just if you put them in a historical drama or something, it's just not going to work because they just don't have the makeup or the acting range to do that. But I guess where we differ is that I do think that Elba has the abilities to play this character. So, and that's a subjective thing. Strictly, like, some people like jazz, other people like rock. All I can say is from what I've seen of Elba in his roles with Luther and The Wire, amongst other things, is I know, to me, he can play this role. And whether it's a question of availability at the time, it's like you said, it's a difficult thing to understand, all things being equal, why you would choose one actor over another. And that would just come down to how they present themselves when they do their screen tests or in their discussions with the creators and producers, that they share the same vision of the character, or it's they're really close to each other, and another actor who might be a good fit for the role too, but has a different view of how things should be, and that just that intangible thing might be the reason why one actor gets the role over another, even though they might be a better fit. So there's more than just the artistic side of things. The business side comes into it a lot. So, and that's the stuff, unfortunately, that we'll never find out about, because that all happens behind closed doors. So if this casting came true, for me, I've already imagined like a fun little tweak to it. Like he could start off at the beginning of the movie with looking like through a telescope or a periscope down on the desert to see Roland, and you see Roland and it's Idris Elba, and then it pulls back to the mountain and we realize we're seeing Randall Flagg, and he also looks like Idris Elba, and then he says something like, "Oh, so it's going to be like this time, is it?" And then he snaps his fingers and he turns into Matthew McConaughey. That would be like a kind of like a wink from the Wrath of Khan, when Kirk sees Spock at the beginning of the movie, says, "Aren't you dead?" Because everybody was really upset when they started hearing the rumors that Spock was going to be killed off in the Wrath of Khan. So this could be kind of like the same thing. Oh, but we'll just have to see how this plays out.
If I could decide, I would like to cast unknown actors in this.
Mm-hmm.
And that I have said way before we got
and again,
any
and the business side
ideas.
of the problem is that for a project this big, they need that big name actor.
Yeah.
And it might turn out if they get McConaughey for Flagg, they're going to say, you know what? Now we can go for an unknown for Roland because we've got that name. They need a name. It has to be one of these characters. It's either Flagg or Roland has to be a big name actor. Yeah. Ideally, it would be both. But
yeah, and I think no matter who you cast, if it's someone who has done a lot before this, you are always going to see him if they would cast Bruce Willis, you would always see him as cop in Die Hard.
Yeah, I think that's one of the attractive things about Elba, though, is a lot of people don't really know him that well.
Yeah, that could be, but yeah. I would prefer to have unknown. But as you say, that probably won't happen. But and if I could pick one, I think I would put a big name on Flagg and keep Roland an unknown actor.
Yeah, I could see that. No.
If I had to pick just one of them, but it's sad that you can't pick unknown because I think then that person would really be Roland and not have this luggage of a lot of other big movies.
Yeah. No, I actually agree with you on that. I think the best strategy would be to cast the big name actor to play Flagg.
Yeah.
Because that's the bad guys are always sort of larger life anyhow, and cast an unknown for Roland. But
yeah.
I'm thinking that they think they need recognizable names, especially for such a long-term project.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. That's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah, and you would also think that maybe King's name would be enough, and you can have those unknown actors in those roles, and you have King's name as a drawing point.
Name, like we talked about, it's going to hit and miss, right? Because you got for every Shawshank Redemption, you've got Children of the Corn 25. So.
Yeah, that's right. And Shawshank Redemption wasn't, at least here in Sweden, they didn't have King's name on the poster. They didn't promote it as a King movie.
Yeah.
So
I think they did that on purpose because of Carrie.
Yeah, I think so.
They wanted to distance themselves from horror.
Yeah. Anyhow, I don't think we're going to agree on this, so we have to agree that we disagree, as they say.
Exactly. Yeah.
And let the future show who was right if this happens. As we have pointed out a few times, this is so far only a rumor. Mm-hmm. As with Matthew McConaughey is also a rumor. There was actually, I don't know if we have actually brought this up. Someone talked with Ron Howard, and he said that the Dark Tower wasn't as green-lighted as people might think now that they have a release date. Yeah. So it is still somewhere there. It might not happen at all, or it might happen, or it might happen one movie, or it might happen several movies. We don't really know what will happen. So. Yeah. And that in itself is quite funny that something that might not even happen has gotten people this upset and engaged.
This story has raised a very interesting mirror for I think everybody needs to look at that and look at how they're thinking about things.
Yeah, definitely.
And there's no right or wrong here. It's so this type of stuff is so unquantifiable, and we've seen instances where they've gotten the dream people that we thought were going to make a kick-ass movie, and it turns out to be terrible. And then other times, that's why when you get a movie like a Shawshank Redemption or a Green Mile or The Dead Zone or Misery, like you really have to treasure those movies because the chance that the odds against them are becoming as good as they are, the way the business works, it's stacked against the business of movie making that the art actually transcends what we finally do get. So, I don't know what shape or form this series is going to take, and I almost kind of think that I would still really like the idea of Pixar doing some sort of a CGI lifelike version of the movie in a way. But yeah, I think it just comes down to get the best people that you can at the time that you're making the movie, regardless of what they look like, and just try to make the best movie that you can that keeps to the spirit of the book as much as possible. And that's all that we fans can hope for. And that's how you respect the source material, hiring what the best people are available at the time, not finding the people that fit predetermined looks that we think that should be part of the story. Because if you don't take risks, you're going to end up with something that's inert and not enjoyable.
Yeah, but we shouldn't take unnecessary risks and unnecessary changes.
Well, that's the decision that's up to the people that make the movies, right?
Yeah, and I think that the only thing we know for sure is if this is ever done, no matter who plays who, there will be parts that we are happy with and there are parts that we won't be happy with. And that's just how it works. And that will be the truth.
Yeah, and to those people out there who's saying that if this casting comes true that they won't go see this movie, you're fooling yourselves, because you will see this movie sooner or later. You will see this. So don't say those kind of things, because I've seen that kind of statement made so many times. Nobody buys that statement. Yeah.
And I would also like to, if when this podcast is out and you who listen to this want to comment on this and tell Lou how wrong he is. No, I'm just kidding. Please do it in a fashionable manner.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah. But no matter if you think Lou is right or if I am right, or if you think somewhere in between is right, do it in a manner that is respectful, and we don't need any hate or stuff like that, because this is, after all, this is a movie casting.
This is supposed to be something that we're supposed to get enjoyment from.
Yeah,
this
exactly.
is not life and death. So
no, and I must say, I think it's funny when people are disagreeing and thinking different, because then discussions like this one you and I are having, and I have had with different people online as well, happens, and I think that is great.
Yeah.
What I think is sad is when people are not respecting that other people are thinking different, and they are making silly comments and stuff that really doesn't add anything to this discussion. And I think those we can do without. Yep. So please keep it civil. And who knows, maybe when this podcast is out, this has all blown over, and Danny DeVito will be cast as Roland.
That's right. I mean, what it comes down to in the end, all we can do as fans is keep an open mind until we actually see the movie, whatever happens, and then make your decision and say this was wrong or this was right. But until then, don't close doors that haven't even been opened yet. Don't lock them. The door hasn't even been opened yet. Just give them a chance first. Then if they blow it, then you put your money down, then you've got the right to slam them. But until it actually is in a finished product, all we can do is keep an open mind and keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best. And if we get situations where we get a Morgan Freeman in a movie in a role that we never had conceived in our mind that was possible, if something like that happens, you have to embrace that, because it ended up making for a better experience. So let's just, whatever happens, whoever they cast for this movie, unless it's something ridiculous, like a 90-year-old man's going to play Roland or something, like something like that. You have to go with it, because there's going to be actors there's actors that everybody doesn't like. And if that actor gets cast in a role for something that you really care about, it's a tough nut to be open-minded about. I admit it. I can't think of such an example off the top of my head, but let's say let's say something silly, like if you cast Bill Murray as Roland, really, that's not going to work for me. I mean, I like Bill Murray, but he's not right for that part. But something silly like that, or like Mickey Mouse or something like that. You know what I mean? Like something ridiculous. Everybody has tastes. So there's going to be something somewhere along the line where there's a book or a story that you really like, and then you find out the cast the person that you can't stand as an actor. Like, what are you gonna do? Like, it's tough. It's tough. Like, the same thing. Like when Ben Affleck got first cast as Batman, people were just, like, no way, that's gonna be terrible. But for myself, the more I see the trailers, he's really the only part I'm actually liking about it. So, which is just surprising the heck out of me. So there you go.
Yeah, and let's face it. I mean, they are going to do what they want, no matter how much we complain about it on the internet. They do what they want to do in the movie, and all we really can do is, as you say, we can watch the movie and make a judgment after we've seen it.
Yeah.
And you and I can speculate in before it's done. And
yeah, I mean, and we have fun conversations like this. And at the end of it, we shake each other's hands and walk away. And this is our last podcast. No, we'll
no.
We'll be back.
We have another one scheduled in a week, so
yeah, we'll be back. So
definitely.
Hans, I don't know if I gave you any food for thought, and I hope for some of the viewers out there, I hope I did. And on the flip side, Hans brought up some great points, and I think it's helped me to refine some of my positions and maybe think about a couple of them a bit more. But that's what this is the kind of thing that these kind of discussions should allow people to walk away with.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It's been interesting to talk about this and hear each other's thoughts about it. And I hope our listeners have enjoyed it as well. And
we're expecting lots and lots of respectful feedback on this topic.
This is a big thing. So let's hope that Elba hasn't come out and say he won't do the part until after this podcast is out, so we can hear his reactions. Then he can. Yeah,
if we help make up his mind, then people are going to be mad at us for saying it was the fault of that stupid podcast that this is what's happened.
I listened to this podcast and now I don't want to do it anymore.
Or now I really want to do it.
Yeah.
Prove all those other people wrong.
Yeah. Well, that would have been fun.
Yeah. Alrighty, so I think we've put this one right into the ground.
Yes.
It was a lot of fun talking about it, and
definitely.
This is the kind of conversation actually would have been great to have like a live show, but
yep.
Oh well. If we get enough feedback on it, maybe we'll try to respond to some of anybody else's points that we didn't cover, and we could look forward to doing that. But who knows? By the time we do the next podcast, this is old news and it's no longer relevant.
Yeah, it might be the case. Might be the case. And in the next podcast, we will be talking about the last six episodes of Haven and how the show ends. It's over. It will be over by then.
Mm-hmm. No Stephen King on TV for a while until February.
Oh, exactly.
Oh.
Yeah. So everyone who's by then seen the final, let us know if this is the ending you preferred, or if there was something else you would have liked instead, or if you are just happy that it's over, like we were with Under the Dome. I'm sure there's a lot of fans who doesn't have this as a favorite show. So let us know about that as well.
Yep. So until next time, let's see if Hans can do the sign off right, because I did it wrong last time. So why don't you take us out, Hans?
Yes. Till next time, stay safe.
But
stay scared.
Oh, you nailed it.
Yep.
All right. Take care, folks. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.